Hey, everybody, welcome to the Fitness Pudding Expert Series, where we bring in experts to provide clarity to all the confusion on health, fitness, and wellness myths. I'm really excited today to have Dr. Bill Campbell with us to talk about metabolism. And Dr. Campbell is a professor of exercise science at the University of South Florida. We've known each other for years. He got his PhD in exercise nutrition and preventive health at Baylor University, where we met. And as a researcher and author, Dr. Campbell has published nearly 200 scientific papers and abstracts in academic journals related to physique enhancement and sports nutrition. In addition, he is a litigation consultant and expert witness related to dietary supplementation. So clearly he's well versed in that area and is a go-to expert for me when I have questions related to that area. Dr. Campbell also does a lot of work with lay journals and publication and media outlets. And so I've reached out to him before on how best to take the evidence and the science and relay that to the people so that positively impacts their behavior. He's also director of the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory at the University of South Florida. His research mostly focuses on helping people optimize their physiques. Dr. Campbell is a fellow of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, where he also recently served as the organization's president and a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Wow, Bill, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I love talking about metabolism. And just thank you for the invitation.
Well, speaking of that, so it seems like I see so much on metabolism that this relates to both diet and exercise. Like this diet speeds it up. This diet slows it down. This type of exercise speeds it up more than this type of exercise. I remember reading one thing years ago about like the top 10 diet mistakes that you're making to slow your metabolism. And one of them was drinking room temperature water, because there's something about drinking cold water 48 ounces a day speeds your metabolism, and you can lose 5 pounds a year or something just by drinking cold water. Anyway, we see so much about it, but my guess is most people don't even know how to define it. So can you tell us what metabolism is and just get us all on the same page?
Sure. So I'm going to have the paradigm of like weight gain and weight loss as I define this. So it's going to be from that perspective, because that's what I study. And I also want to make one other clarification. We're assuming that people are healthy. So I research healthy individuals. So we're not going to assume any metabolic diseases or metabolism, like thyroid issues. Now, we can talk about that later. But those are the two things just to provide some context to what we're going to discuss. So the word metabolism is essentially how many calories your body burns in a 24-hour period. If your body burns a lot of calories, you are said to have a fast metabolism. If you don't burn that many calories, then you would have a slow metabolism. And as we put this in the perspective of weight gain and weight loss, if you obviously we eat food, which provide calories, and your body burns calories, which is what we call metabolism. If your body is burning more calories than you are eating from food, you lose weight. If, on the other hand, you're eating more calories from food than what your body burns in a day, you gain weight. So metabolism is very important in this construct of whether or not you're going to gain weight over time or lose weight over time. And when you hear the word metabolism, just it's kind of associated with the word calories. How many calories is my body burning?
Okay, so calories. Now, so on that, why do we say burn calories?
Yeah, so the scientific term is oxidize, where we're literally breaking down carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So those are the nutrients that our body will take in from our food and they'll store, and the body oxidizes it or burns it. And basically, it's breaking down. When you hear the word burns, it's just breaking down. So we have stored fat, we have stored carbohydrates in our muscle and liver. Burning is just another word for shrinking, breaking it down. And the reason it breaks it down is to provide us energy. And that energy is captured in the form of ATP, because that's like the body's currency that it uses. But while it's breaking that down, it releases heat. And that's really what calories are. Calories is a measure of heat production. So burning, heat production, I think all of those terms kind of support each other. But for normal people, we all know what a calorie is, and we all know what burning food for energy is. So we don't have to overcomplicate it with all of these other terms. But I think that's probably where burn comes from.
Yeah, okay. Because when I think about burning calories, I think of the bomb calorimeter where you test the sample food and blow it up and measure how much heat it gives off. Or as when we look at direct calorimetry and exercise and measure how much heat someone gives off during exercise and convert that to calories. And I think you're right. It's amazing to me how consumed we are with calories in one aspect. And sometimes I wish the word would have never been invented. But then other times, like you're saying now with metabolism, it seems to be a pretty central aspect. And particularly if I'm gaining weight, I have a slow metabolism, or if I'm classified as overweight by some measure, that I have a slow metabolism, either as the cause or as the current status. So, can you tell us about slow metabolism in that case?
Yeah, and I would say that's a myth. A lot of people, particularly people who are overweight, they have this false idea that they have to have a slow metabolism.
Hmm.
I personally have tested at least thousands, if not over 10,000 metabolic rates in my career. So I do this many, many, many days. And of course, remember back when we were at Baylor University, many times in a day for several years, we're looking at metabolic rate tests. So I've seen a lot. And I've measured metabolic rates in obese individuals, very lean individuals, even some people with eating disorders. So I've seen it all over the landscape in terms of body types and different body weights.
Mm-hmm.
And while people think they have a slow metabolism and that's causing them to gain weight or be overweight, the reality is, in my experience, let's just say I've observed 10,000 metabolic rate tests. It's a handful of people who have actually had a slow metabolism. The reality is your metabolic rate or your metabolism is actually higher the more weight you have. The heavier one is, it takes more energy or more calories to be burned to fuel the activity of that body to keep it alive. So let me just say also, in the rare case when I have seen a slow metabolism, and I'm saying it is very rare. In every case, it has always been somebody who was formerly obese that has lost their weight and they've been able to maintain that weight. But unfortunately, their metabolisms are lower than what we would predict. So if you think you have a slow metabolism, you likely do not.
Okay, so that's the myth part. Now, how would we clarify for the folks listening? How do they know if they have a slow metabolism or not? So, in other words, how would you define it from
Yeah,
from
so
your aspect?
there's two ways. There's an objective way, and then there's a subjective way. So, and the subjective way gets to be very subjective and probably interpreted incorrectly. But the objective way is to actually measure it. If you want to know what your metabolism is, you have to measure it. And you mentioned earlier, you used some scientific terms, direct calorimetry, and then there's the other one called indirect calorimetry. So direct calorimetry is really cool. It's actually the gold standard for measuring metabolic rate. That's where you would put somebody in a sealed off room and you would do one of two things. You literally measure the amount of heat their body puts off. If somebody has a fast metabolism, their body is putting out more heat as they're breaking down these stored foods. And as these bonds break, it's releasing heat energy. That's not very practical. There's not a lot of those direct calorimetry rooms in labs.
Right.
The other way is called indirect calorimetry, which is much more common. So almost every exercise physiology laboratory has an indirect calorimeter, which is what my lab uses. And that's where you put a mask on somebody's face or you put a hood over their head, like a plastic hood. And instead of measuring their heat production, you're measuring how much oxygen their body consumes. And the reason that that works so well is there's a direct correlation between the amount of oxygen that you consume and the amount of heat that your body is putting out. So both of those methods tell you what your metabolic rate is. So that's, again, that's the best way to do this. And I do also want to say some people will go to a gym to get an objective test.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful because some people will go after lunch or after work, and that's not a very valid test because you've just been moving all day. Now you have food. Food intake causes metabolic rate to elevate. Exercise. Did you walk across a hot parking lot to get to the lab?
Mm.
So all of those things. So if you're ever going to get your metabolism actually tested, make sure you do it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. That way you know you're getting a truer value of your metabolic rate.
Right. And so that would be, so some we might call that our resting metabolic rate, right? And
Yeah.
that's some high percentage of our total daily energy expenditure, correct?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So earlier I said your metabolism is the total amount of calories you're burning in a day. We tend to break that down into three different categories. Your resting metabolic rate is the amount of calories you're burning when you're at rest. So the way that I like to define that is if you were to wake up in the morning in your bed and never get out of bed, you stay in bed all day long until the next morning, the amount of calories you would burn in that case is called your resting metabolic rate. And that is about 75% of the total calories that you burn. Now, there's two other areas that also contribute to your total metabolism. One would be walking, going to the bathroom, walking to work, getting in your car. We call that like activity thermogenesis. So the act of doing all of those things will increase your metabolic rate, and that has an impact. The other thing is food intake. When you eat food, that causes your metabolism to increase. And then we have some other minor, or not minor, but like fidgeting. Do you tap your feet a lot? Or are you just fidgety and constantly moving around? That's actually a large component that we've learned over the years that can cause your total metabolism to go up over the course of the day. And then, of course, exercise is a huge component, which can really drive your metabolism higher or lower if you're not active at all. So when you go to the lab and we put a mask on you or a bubble, we are measuring the resting energy expenditure component, which again is the largest piece of this puzzle. And it really gives us insight into, do you have a fast or slow metabolism?
Right. So I think one of the next myths I'm going to ask in a moment is about changing that metabolism, right? And can we do that? But before we get there, if somebody goes in and they come into your lab and they get tested first thing in the morning, they're going to have some 1,200 calories come up, 1,500 calories, somewhere around there or something, right? And then you're going to look at that number and you're going to decide, is that normal, high, or low? Do you have some comparison charts that you use, or is it based on weight? How do you determine then at that point, once you know through a proper test what their metabolic rate is or their resting metabolism, to determine if it's normal, high, or low?
Yeah, so one thing we do, and let me just give general numbers. A general non-overweight female will be in the neighborhood of about 1,300 calories. A general healthy male who's not overweight will be 1,600 to 1,800 calories. Let's just say 1,700 calories, somewhere in there. So there are prediction equations where you put in your height, your weight, your age, and it will predict what your metabolic rate should be. And probably the most clinically famous equation is called the Harris-Benedict equation. And that's what my lab uses to use as a guide. So we know what your metabolism should be based on your height, your sex, and your weight, and your age. And then we measure it. And again, as I've said before, almost every single time when we measure it, it's very close to your predicted to your predicted metabolic rate based on this equation. But your metabolism could be slower than that, or it could be faster than that. And that's where we would make a determination. Hey, your metabolism is faster or your metabolism is
Okay.
slower.
Is there a way for somebody to get their resting metabolism, for example, and then add in how active they are to get some total, and then they can know what they should or how much they should eat?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And to answer your first question, yeah, if you use the internet and you type in Harris Benedict and you put in your height, your weight, your sex, your age, the number you get for your resting metabolic rate, it's going to be within the ballpark. But sometimes it might be 200 calories off or 100 calories off. So I would say if you have the means to go ahead and get it tested, that's
Okay.
always going to be better. The other thing is we have to caution is, let's say you do get your metabolic rate tested, your resting metabolic rate, and the number comes back at 1,500 calories. A lot of people think, okay, if I eat 1,500 calories, I won't gain weight. That's not what we tested. Your resting metabolic rate assumes you've done nothing but lay down all day long in your bed. And that's not what your total metabolism is. You have to have what we call an activity factor.
Mm.
So your total metabolism is not 1,500 calories. That's just the resting part of your metabolism.
Okay.
So depending on how active you are, it might be 1.5 times that, or 2,250 is what your maintenance calories would be. So a lot of people try to eat to what their resting metabolic rate is, and that would be reducing your calories too much, and that's going to actually slow down your metabolism and cause some other problems.
Some people believe they can't change their metabolism, or I guess I would add in, well, if I'm supposed to be expending, I don't know, 2250 a day, well, I'm just going to eat way lower than that, and then I'm going to lose weight and everything's going to be okay. So I guess that would be my next question. How would you answer questions related to, one, I can't change my metabolism? And the second question would be, what would be ways that I could affect it? As you just mentioned, if I eat too little, that could actually have negative effects.
Yeah, so your metabolism is not static. It doesn't stay the same. It is dynamic. In fact, if you live your whole life and you don't change anything about your exercise or your nutrition habits, your metabolism changes just by the act of aging. It slows down. So that's if you don't make any noticeable changes. It still slows down with every decade of life.
Okay.
The other thing is, a bigger body is a higher metabolic rate. A smaller body is a slower metabolic rate. And I like to use the example, would you expect a mouse or an elephant to have a higher metabolic rate? Well, clearly the elephant, because it has so much more mass. Now, relatively speaking, the mouse might have a faster one relative to its body weight. But if you were formerly obese and you've lost a lot of weight and now you're trying to maintain that weight, your metabolism is considerably slower because you have a smaller body. It takes less calories that your body needs to burn to have your new body size functioning. So where a lot of people get in trouble with weight loss and metabolism problems is this. They go on a diet and they lose weight. And let's say they reduce their calories by 500 calories per day. The fact that their metabolism changes, and meaning when I say change, it goes down, their metabolism has now adjusted to this lower caloric intake. So what used to be a 500 calorie deficit might only be a 250 calorie deficit now. So a lot of people experience the problem of they lose a lot of weight early in a diet, and it's very encouraging. But then they get to week 6, week 7, they're like, I'm not losing weight. The reason is because their metabolism has now slowed down to match their current body weight. So now it becomes almost a vicious cycle. If they want to continue to lose weight, they've got to reduce their calories more. Well, guess what happens in the next month to their metabolism? It matches that. So again, it's a vicious cycle. And I would just say that the one of the biggest things that I've learned about monitoring people's weight loss is don't be in a hurry. Lose weight at a slow rate. That really helps protect your metabolism. And then the other thing is, if you can exercise while losing weight, that also protects your muscle, and muscle will help protect your metabolism. So the worst things you can do is go on a crash diet and try to lose a ton of weight in a month. That is, you're setting yourself up for a lot of future fat loss. You're setting yourself up for failure for successful weight loss in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really important because clearly, from a behavioral standpoint, not only this, I'm doing so well at first and then I hit a plateau, so to speak, that can be extremely discouraging and can knock people off the rail. Like you said, what, 6 weeks or a few months? Man, everything's going well, but you're trying hard, you're watching your diet, you're doing things the right way, but then the weight loss starts slowing down. So at that point, someone would need the ability to retest your resting metabolism could be quite beneficial at that standpoint, right? Like every 6, 9 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, I would say never more than a month. The machine might not be sensitive enough to detect small changes, but yeah, I would say every 2 months, especially if you're trying to lose weight. That would give you an indication of, am I harming my metabolism with my current eating habits or my current plan? And if you are losing weight too rapidly, it's likely that your metabolism is slowing down. And there's actually a term called metabolic or adaptive thermogenesis, which is not a good thing. That means your metabolism has slowed down more than what we would predict from just the weight that you've lost.
Okay.
And again, we see that in people who are on crash diets. Crash diet is, in my opinion, the worst thing you can do to have, one, just an enjoyable lifestyle, but two, to help you have long-term weight loss maintenance. Crash diets work against you.
Well, that's crazy, right? Because as you and I both know, there are many diets that have existed that we would probably define as crash diet, but they are selling it as a way to speed metabolism. But with that, if somebody is doing that and they want to do it right, is there any sort of expectation as far as if they're maybe a little overweight to begin with, some speed, a percentage of weight loss every few weeks, or do you have any way that you advise, at least
Yeah,
generally, on that?
yeah. We use a threshold, and this is based on the literature where if the threshold, if you exceed this threshold, you tend to lose more muscle mass, and we suppress metabolic rate. That threshold is 1% of your body weight per week. And sometimes that can get a little bit too precise. So I like to think, what is that over a month? So I kind of like to think in terms of a month. And I also need to say, if somebody's obese, this recommendation may not apply to an obese individual. There may be health reasons why more than 1% per week is better suited. So I would, obviously, in that case, an obese individual be working with their physician. But for non-obese individuals, 1% per week would be the fastest that I would recommend losing weight. And I know, Mark, you're the kind of the expert in the behavioral aspect of this, but I believe that if you are on a crash diet and you're having all of this weight loss success, in quotes, because the scale's going down, you're probably adopting habits that you're not going to be able to sustain 3 months or 5 months. But if you're able to lose weight consistently in a slower manner, I believe that you're going to develop habits that are going to become part of your lifestyle, and that you probably could be doing 6 months or a year from now.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. I talk a lot about even if we try to reach like 150 minutes a week of physical activity or 7 to 13 servings of fruit and vegetable a day, these health guidelines, even if we meet those too quickly, um, we don't give ourselves time to learn these, like you're saying, these key behavioral strategies and abilities and knowledge about ourselves. What works for us? What doesn't work for us? What are the barriers? Where are my sticking points? What do I like? What do I not like? And if I just go on a crash diet, then I don't give myself time to learn all those things, which it's those things, especially in the early stages of behavior change, that we have to play things out successfully in the long run. Yet the weight loss is very reinforcing. The fitting into clothes that come from that can be very reinforcing, as are comments from others. Hey, you lost weight, looking good type comments. And even as you know, if I lose a lot of weight very quickly, I could even see some of my health parameters improve, my blood sugar and things. And then that can be reinforcing to that crash diet mentality. But you're exactly right. Behaviorally speaking, it's much like the metabolism, is that it could be negatively affected in the long run by doing the crash diet. You mentioned about muscle. So I assume then that the amount of muscle someone has affects their resting metabolism.
Yeah, so there's a direct correlation between one's muscle mass and their metabolic rate. So it happens to be the largest predictor of metabolic rate, other than just pure body size. So exercise is stimulating the muscles. So while dieting, any exercise helps preserve metabolic rate. And if you enjoy resistance exercise, that's clearly the best type. But if you don't like that, any exercise is better than no exercise. So to kind of just bring this back, everybody when they go on a diet, they're focused on the scale. But because I focus on metabolism as well as the scale, I'm always sensitive to what's happening to your metabolism, because that's going to be the key to predict your future success in your weight loss. So I think we can all point to the fact that somebody goes on a quick weight loss diet. What happens 6 months after the diet? That they gain the weight back. And just to bring this back to metabolism, you're not really measuring your metabolism. You're so focused on the scale. But do be aware what is also happening with my metabolism as I'm engaging in these changes in my diet.
You have any thoughts on any other things that people need to know about that could affect metabolism, ideally in a positive way, but also negatively?
Yeah, so a recent area of research that my lab has been focusing on, and we just completed a study in females on this, is the concept of diet breaks.
Hmm.
So a lot of people, they'll go on a diet and they'll think, okay, I'm going to go on a diet for the next 4 months or 16 weeks or 12 weeks or 6 months. And there's some research to indicate that's not that's not the best approach. You're kind of asking for your metabolism to be suppressed the longer a diet lasts.
Hmm.
So there was a study in obese males where they would have them diet for 2 weeks, then they would take 2 weeks off and they wouldn't diet for those 2 weeks.
What would they eat? Would they eat their total caloric? Their
Yes. So they would
Okay.
go back to what they were eating before the diet began, which we would say is a maintenance level.
Okay, so they wouldn't be overeating per se.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
But they did go back to pre-diet levels. So that's important. But yeah, you do. It is. They still had to restrain what they ate because they were not allowed to overeat
Right,
during
okay.
the 2 weeks. And what they found in that study was the obese male subjects who were taking breaks every 2 weeks, they were able to maintain their muscle mass better, and they were able to significantly keep their metabolisms from being suppressed. So I would tell anybody, go ahead and plan for breaks in your diet. Like, don't diet for 3 months straight. Now, I always jokingly say, unless you're getting married on a certain day, I'll give you a pass. I can appreciate you're going to be getting married, and you're going to have to fit into that dress. But other than that one exception,
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with taking a break. Just make sure that you're not overeating during those 2 weeks.
Well, how does that play into like the cheat day, where it many times it's over, or the cheat week, as I call it, it's over consuming. I mean, so it's still self control, or I mean, it sounds like
It
it's going to
is.
feel like you're eating more, but you're not overeating.
Yeah, so if when you say cheat, I don't like that terminology because that implies I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. Okay.
The research would suggest that it is important that you do not diet during your diet break. Do not keep your calories low, but they do need to go back to higher maintenance level. But anything over that, now you're just offsetting some of the progress that you made when you were dieting. So I can give, actually tomorrow, we're presenting some data on our diet break study in females. Now, it's important to know that they were eating higher protein and they were resistance training.
Yeah.
We did not show any benefits to taking a diet break, but there were no harms.
Mhm.
So you can look at that either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Well, there's no advantage. I'm not going to do it. Or, hey, I'm going to go on vacation, or I'm going to have, a birthday party or some type of life event during this week. And as long as I don't overeat, I'm going to stop dieting so I can actually enjoy these social interactions without any fear of gaining weight during that time. So I think that's pretty powerful. And there's just something about and again, this is your expertise, but if I know I'm going to be able to take a break next week, maybe that gives me energy to not fail this week. And then after the end of that week of taking a break, maybe I'm a little more motivated to go back into my diet.
Yeah. Well, it definitely provides flexibility for people. It provides flexibility to accommodate that. And you probably have a strong line of research ahead of you to really, we should probably talk about this, behaviorally speaking, if you can match someone up to the break, so to speak, accommodated to their personal preference, or you could probably measure certain things psychologically. We talk about burnout, and we talk about before people burn out. There's this phase in the sports psychology called stillness,
Hmm.
where they're starting to show signs of burnout, and we can look at this in medical profession, any profession. And so there could be something related to that with dieting, and maybe somebody's looked at that, but that'd be fascinating, right? To say that, and you could potentially change that over time. When motivation's high up front, you might be able to make it 3 weeks on the diet with a week break. But then as you're adjusting for metabolism, and over time that 3 weeks is a little bit longer. I don't know. Other people, I think, if they take their time, they can adapt behaviorally and with their own perceptions and their attitude and things. Because at some point, right, Bill, you get to a point to where you're not dieting anymore. Like at some point, right, once you reach your weight goal, let's say in this example, what do you is that you're just calling that maintenance phase? Is that the terminology you use?
Yeah, so we use maintenance, like a maintenance calorie level, which is the amount of calories that you're eating where you're neither gaining weight or losing weight. So earlier we talked about the ways to measure your metabolism. The objective way is to get it measured. The
Hmm.
subjective way is to kind of monitor how much food you're able to eat without gaining or losing weight. If you're able to eat a lot more food without gaining weight, that's probably an indication that you have a relatively faster metabolism. And if you can't eat much food, that's an indication that you are maybe have a slower metabolism. The problem with that approach, though, for most people, including myself, we think we eat a lot less food than we do.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm hesitant to put that into the power of a subjective mindset when we could just measure it objectively.
Are you looking at the quality of the food and the makeup of those calories?
Not in my research studies. We implement what's called a protein anchored flexible dieting approach. So we give people a calorie target and we give them a protein target. So we say, hey, as an example, you normally eat 2,000 calories. Well, your diet calories are 1,500, and we want you to eat 500 calories from protein. The other 1,000 left over, eat whatever you want. So that's how we do our research. In my own life, particularly since COVID, I've been trying to do a lot more personal experimentation with my own diet and just being more sensitive to processed versus unprocessed,
Hmm.
snacking versus not snacking. And what I've learned, and this is just my anecdotal thoughts from my own eating habits, definitely having more whole foods, it
Hmm.
has a much larger positive benefit on my feeling of being full or being
Yeah.
satiated.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, I'm learning that 2,800 calories, which is my maintenance calories, depending on the foods I eat, it's a big difference in how I feel that day. Not how I feel, but in terms of how hungry or
Yeah.
full I feel.
Would you also think about experimenting with maybe not eating as late, eating like the time of day? that people eat? Are those two reasonable things to just to test in your own life?
I'm definitely an advocate for personal experimentation. So what
Okay.
works for you, what doesn't. I tend not to put much of an emphasis on timing. I believe that because I think we start to overcomplicate things and people start
Mhm.
focusing on the trees rather than the forest. So
Yeah.
I believe that total daily caloric intake, so your total calories throughout the day, is the most important thing. Now, I just gave my students an assignment where I asked them to fast for 32 hours. And the reason I do that assignment, so basically, I want them to have their last meal some night, then they go to bed. They wake up the next morning. They don't eat anything that entire day. They go to bed the next night, and then they can eat that morning. The reason I give them that assignment is I want them to become in tune with their natural hunger drive. I think some people eat breakfast just because they're in a habit of eating food at breakfast,
Yeah.
but they might not be hungry at breakfast. Or they always have a snack between, let's say, lunch and dinner, but they're really not hungry. It's just a habit. So the thing I love about that assignment is it kind of lets people, for the first time probably in their lives, oh, I'm really hungry when I wake up, or I'm starving at 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
The one thing I've learned with this is I'm not hungry. I don't eat breakfast. My first meal's around 10 o'clock because knowing that total calories is the most important thing for weight maintenance. I want to have the majority of my food when I'm most naturally hungry, which to me is around 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So why would I have these calories in the morning? And I'm not saying breakfast is bad.
Yeah.
It's not. I have yet to find intervention-based research to suggest that it's more important than another meal, even though we're always told it's the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
For weight maintenance, I would say try to learn your body's natural hunger drive and then feed that.
So maybe that's kind of where we'll end, is this ideal recommendation of, and I think it's healthy behaviorally, is to experiment, to see what works within reason, and avoid the crash dieting. And if the means are available, go get tested, and get tested within a reasonable amount of time as weight loss is occurring, so that you can ensure that you're losing the weight in the right timing, but you're going to be learning not only metabolically but also behaviorally, psychologically, what you need to do for maintaining that weight loss in the long run. Is there anything you'd want to add to that? Is that a decent summary?
Yeah.
Oh, and exercise, stay physically active as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. In the spirit of not trying to overcomplicate it, I wouldn't think I would add anything to that.
So I appreciate you taking the time this afternoon and joining in. And is there any way that people can follow you on social media and keep up with what you're doing?
Yes. So I'm on one social media channel. It's Instagram, and my username is at Bill Campbell PhD. I'm active on there almost daily, and I do a lot of education on in that medium. So I do true false questions, multiple choice, all around the area of weight loss, sports nutrition, exercise science, that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks. I'll go follow you at this point. So,
All right. Thank you.
all right, Dr. Campbell, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.